Well, good morning. It's not easy to come and turn and speak after after singing that song. Uh, I'm so honored to be here. It's my first time in Asheville. It's my first time at Unity of the Blue Ridge. So, thank you for welcoming me. Reverend Darlene, in her absence, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak and be a part of the music here, and Reverend Christie, who has been so gracious. How's everybody doing? Me too. Did you all order the frost and the cold just for me when I? Okay, thank you. It just woke me up, gave me a boost. I am originally from Nashville, so this is doesn't get quite as cold in Nashville as it does here, but it is certainly not the temperatures of Southern California, so at least I got a little buffer before I came here. This is beautiful. Born in Nashville, grew up in a community that was founded in 1868 by a missionary. And as the years progressed, there were lots of stories. This became a very decisive type of commitment that this man made. And from what I understand, he just stood flat-foot in a field of thickets and brush and said, well, I'm going to build my church here because this is the providence of God that has led me to this place. So my grandmother used to tell me the stories of how Lake Providence became this wonderful community. And by the time I came along in 1970, it was just burgeoning. All types of package stores and barber shops and offices, and it was wonderful. And I used to play on those trails that were now streets. So it was absolutely beautiful. I'm the third child of three. I'm the baby. My brother's 15 years older than I am, almost 15 years older than I am, and my sister's 11 years older than I am. I was spoiled. Yes, I was. And growing up in the South, it was very interesting because there were certain things that were part of life: manners, respect, and definitely church. And I tried to appease the wishes of everybody, to be that good little boy, you know. And I got away with it, with everybody, except for one person. That was my father. My father was born in 1925. Quite a bit of difference between 1925 and 1970. And by the time I came along and popped out, I was just fully self-expressed. Hey, how are you doing? You know, in the South they say children are seen and not heard, and I'd heard that all over. But I couldn't help it. Loved everybody, wanted to touch everybody, very tactile child. My father was the exact opposite. So this created dissonance between us. My father, when I was a young boy, he was the apple of my eye. He was the greatest thing that I had ever known in my life, and I wanted to be just like him. And wanting to be just like my father, I wanted to touch him, I wanted to hug him, I wanted to kiss him, I wanted him to be a part of my life. And you know, growing up, I used to always say on Saturdays, Daddy, will you please go out and play ball with me? Will you take me to the store with you? I want to meet your friends. I want to talk to them. And my father was emotionally vacant. A man of order, great order, but emotionally vacant. So as the years went on of being told, little boys don't go around touching people and hugging people and asking people if you can kiss them and those types of things. Little boys don't do things like that. So I grew up trying to appease the wishes of my father. And after a while, there was this part of me that thought that something was wrong with me. I needed to fix it. Hurry up before anybody else knew. Because my father was keen on what was wrong with me. And I spent the majority of my life trying to make everything all right just to get his approval. I became the grand overachiever. Straight A student. I was a high school football All-American, went to college on a football scholarship. Nothing seemed to move my dad. The first time I put my report card down, had all A's, and I did talk a lot, but I said, Dad, look, I got straight A's. He went right to conduct. Mm-hmm. Teacher says you need to be quiet. At 6 or 7 years old, you don't quite get the message under that. So you think it's a scorn. It's a reprimand. And so I spent the majority of my life, I'll say, trying to get my father's approval. And after a while, I became very resentful of the fact that my father didn't want to be around me, didn't touch me, and most of all, had never told me that he loved me. So at the age of 15, I was about to go off to college, had a football scholarship, and these schools are calling me, and I'm having an opportunity to go and visit campuses. And I was trying to muster up the courage just to go in and say, Daddy, would you like to go to this school with me? Because I'm thinking about going there, and I'd like for you to be a part of my decision. But those things had rusted. And so I went off to school, still bitter, still unhappy. Left school, graduated college, started working for IBM. I thought, yes, finally, I'm out on my own. This'll do it. This'll be the trick. This'll be the whole identity of manhood that he's been waiting for me to jump into. I was living in Memphis at the time. My parents were still in Nashville, and I went home and I told my mother. Of course, my mother was excited. And I went and said, Dad, guess what? I got a job with IBM, marketing rep. I have one of the largest territories in my office branch. Nothing. I was on my way back to Memphis, and I saw a billboard on the side of the street. It said, Jesus cares for you. And I slowed my car down and pulled to the side. And I said, you know what? I don't care if Jesus cares for me. I want my daddy to care for me. The magnitude of all of those years had weighed so much on me that I didn't realize how it had affected me. Got back to Memphis. I worked for IBM for 2 wonderful years and thought, well, this is not for me. I got called to Atlanta, another great outfit, and a year later they fired me. So all of these things that I had overachieved at were running out. The grades, the athleticism, college, IBM. So what now? The only time that me and my father ever really sat down was on summer afternoons, right before my mother prepared Sunday dinner. My father was a great lover of music, and he used to listen to B.B. King and Nat King Cole and Billie Holiday and T-Bone Walker. And I'd say, Daddy, can I sit and listen? Please, please. He said, yeah, you can under one condition. I said, yes, sir. He said, don't talk. I said, okay. And I would hear these songs coming out and just feel the air. I was born by the river in a little old tent. The only time that I think anything could coerce my father into just closing his eyes and being present. Perhaps tapping into that emotional lilt that was coming through Sam Cooke's voice. And I would look over at him and he'd tilt his head back, close his eyes. That was monumental for me because I never saw him at rest. Always go. Always too busy. By this time, I had decided to take the advice of a friend. Just been fired. Started singing open mic at this jazz club in Atlanta, Georgia. And so he comes up to me and he says, man, you can really sing. You ought to think about going into musical theater. Well, the thought of musical theater made me cringe. football player strong. Musical theater, not so much, I thought at that time. I said, so why do you say that? He said, because you sing so well. I said, well, I learned all these songs with my grandmother and my father. It's a way for me to wash the week off from all the number crunching. He said, you should still think about it. I said, okay, I will. Well, I did. I jumped in to this thing called acting. Performance art. Never done it before in my life. And I loved it. And perhaps, I think about it now, perhaps I was just jumping back into that fully self-expressed little boy. But I couldn't help it. And I was doing community theater. I wouldn't make a week's worth of groceries, but there was something inside of that that caused me to be full of joy. I got a big break while I was in Atlanta. I got called in to do this show called The Amen Corner, based on the James Baldwin's novel. And I was doing it and a voice came to me. That's the only way that I can describe it. I call it the intuition, the intuitive. It said, you ought to move to New York. Think about moving to New York. Now, I'm from the South. I'm a Southern boy. If I even went to my parents and said, I'm thinking about moving, if I got the word new out, they'd say, we know what you're about to say. New York, that's not going to work. But it was calling me. And I can't explain it. It's something that I never could articulate. And so I said, okay, I'm going to buy a ticket, and I'm going to go and test it out. I think I can do it, but we'll see. Broadway's calling. Now, everybody knows, or at least I do really well, that before you make any leap that big, the last person that you consult is your mother. Now, my mother, who was just so ecstatic about what I had done, had begun to question my options. And so she said, son, I want you to do me a favor, since you said you're ready to go to New York. Before you go, I want you to go to the yellow pages. And I want you to go to the business section and thumb all the way through till you get to the letter P. When you get to the letter P, I want you to thumb all the way down until you get to the word psychiatrist. And that first listing, I want you to call, set an appointment, tell them I have deep problems. Go in and see them, and by the time you come out, you'll be okay because you have lost your mind. In hindsight, I can see how my mother's advice was steeped in her concern for me, but I had to go, and I left. July 6, 1996, I landed in New York City. I wanted to be on Broadway. First audition was for Jesus Christ Superstar for the national tour. And I went in, there was about 450 people there. I went in and auditioned and I sang an anthem. See, my grandmother had taught me anthems, spirituals. I got gospel at Granny's and blues at home. And so I knew how to sing from that place of conviction, because that's the only place that my grandmother sung from. I got hired, cast in the national tour of Jesus Christ Superstar with the original Jesus and the original Judas, Ted Neely and Carl Anderson. And I played Simon, traveled all over the country, and we were leaving Casper, Wyoming, going all the way on a sleeper bus to Long Beach, California. Took about 2 hours of sleep, then got up and started talking to the bus driver. Great conversation. And all of a sudden in the conversation, something whizzes by the bus. And I take note of it. I said, did you see that? He said, oh, yeah. That's a tumbleweed. I said, that's a tumbleweed? Tumbleweed? Never seen a tumbleweed. in the movies have I seen a tumbleweed. I thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. I've seen a tumbleweed. So we continue our talk, and out of my right periphery, I see something else coming toward the bus. And as it made its presence closer, I turned to look at it, and it just faded. I said, that's odd. I said, that must have been another tumbleweed, but the velocity of the bus, I don't see how it would be coming towards the bus. Continued our conversation, and here it is again. Same thing. Coming towards the bus. And this time I was not going to miss it. So I made a quick turn and I looked at it, and there it was, the face of my father. You see, when I moved to New York, the thing was, yes, I'm going to be on Broadway. I want to be on Broadway. But in the back of my mind, I thought, and I'll be far, far away from him. See, all of the pain, I was trying to run from it. That emotional lineage, if you will. I couldn't get away from it, but I tried. And so that apparition, that moment, followed me all the way back to New York, off tour, in my bedroom. And I was sitting on the edge of my bed, and again I hear a voice say, call him. Call him now. Picked up the phone. My mother answered the phone, and I said, Mommy, is Daddy there? She said, yeah, he's right here. I said, could you please put him on the phone? I never bypassed talking to my mother that quick. My father had an interesting way of talking. It was just flat. Hello. And all the courage that I had gained just to make the phone call, at that moment in my mind, it left. I was talking to the man who I loved, the man who had escaped me my entire life, it seemed. And I started a rant. I talked to him about all the things that he said and did to me when I was growing up. I said, do you remember that? Do you remember when you said that in front of my friends? It was so embarrassing. Didn't come to see me play one sport until my junior year in high school, and my brother dragged you. Do you remember any of that? When you told me that I would probably end up in juvenile after looking at my report card. Do you remember any of that? And my father said, well, I have something to say. I said, yes. He said, I think you got the wrong one. I don't remember none of that. Well, I became angry. And in my anger, I hear this voice say it. Tell him. I took a deep breath and I said, Daddy, I forgive you. Silence. Well, I didn't like that he didn't have a response. So I started down the other laundry list. Right in the middle of it, I hear the voice say, tell him. Tell him what you really want to say to him. And I said, Daddy, I love you. I always have. And I always will. Silence. I got off the phone. And I cried. And I cried. And after I sobered up, I heard something say, congratulations. Congratulations on the covenant. What covenant? The covenant that you just made. You stepped into something. It's called you. You released him, but you set yourself free. I didn't understand that at that time. Not all of it. I understood release, I understood forgiveness, but not on that deep level. That's 1997. All those years in between, I would never make a telephone call or go home without telling him. All right, Daddy, we'll see you later. I'll call you when I get home. All right, Mama, love you. Daddy, I love you. Mm-hmm. I kept it. 2009 runs around, and my father's now on dialysis. He's been diagnosed with end-stage renal disease. My mother is, of course, working overtime, and so I go home. I go home for 6 months. I won't fray the responsibility that she has. Still do my work, travel, but I can travel from Nashville too. So my father comes home at 11 in the morning. He's spent 3 days a week on the machine. He's exhausted. And I'm coming right into the kitchen where my mother is preparing him breakfast. And I step into the room and he lifts his head. He looks at me and he says, "Oh, there's my baby. Daddy loves you." And it was startling. My mother was in the room, and I said, "Who you talking to, me or Mama?" He said, "I'm talking to you. You." Well, see, there was still a part of me that was holding on to, where was that when I was 3 and 4 and 5? And where was that? I just I wanted you to tell me when I was pulling on your pant leg, begging you to come outside to play with me. I just needed to hear you say, "Son, I'm proud of you." Where was that? Standing in the middle of a fork road. Then there was that part of me that spoke boldly and said, remember the covenant. I said, "Oh, I remember. He's ready now. Are you?" I took a deep breath and I looked at him and I said, "I love you too, Daddy. I'm ready. I'll meet you just where you are." Never having seen my father cry, I had an opportunity to watch my father change, transform. I was too. November, Thanksgiving 2012. My mother rushes into the room, and I'm in there for the holiday, and she says, "You go see your dad. Something's going on with him." And I go into the room, and my father's sitting on the edge of the bed, and he is weeping. There's a box of Kleenex in his hand. And all I heard was, "Just stand there with him. Stand there and be there with him. You don't have to coach him. Stand there and be with him." February 2013, my father transitioned. I was there all 5 days in the palliative ward with him. The heart opening that occurred during that time was enough for me to understand that somewhere in there, this was all a divine setup. Didn't feel like it. It didn't. Flashes of the father, the dad, that I had held him on a pedestal all these years. But then one thing came into focus, and I had to listen to it. I had to. And what it said was, he was a man. He was a human too. And he too had the same type of thing happen to him. He couldn't give what you thought he should have because he'd never gotten it himself. That is really one thing that took me a time to wrestle with it. I didn't want to realize that, but it was true. And that's when I just began to open up. Forgiveness got my heart to open. The Tin Man, if you will, saw Dorothy in a whole nother light than the Scarecrow and the Lion. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to see him in that way. And I believe somewhere down the line that me telling my father, that me keeping that covenant somehow gave him permission to say it himself. Because I tell you, he sure did open me up. My greatest teacher ever. I never would have been able to stand here before you if it were not for him. That I am grateful. As we take a deep breath together. As we inhale and then exhale, let's just go into a moment of meditation. Realizing that right where we are is exactly where we're supposed to be. And that all that is coming to the surface is coming to give us an opportunity to open wider our hearts. To see it from a whole different perspective. Life, that is. Our life and the life of others. Father, Mother God, I give great thanks for this day, for this time, for this life, for this love, for this joy, the opportunity to step into forgiveness, into compassion, into the wisdom of the heart. Knowing that as I step in, as we step in, others will follow. We become the embodiment of the Christ consciousness. Yes, to love and to be loved. So in this moment, I just give great thanks for all that has been said, that's been heard, and that's been of deep listening. I give great thanks for this and so much more. And I say, and so it is. Amen. I'm tired of the guilt that brings me pain. Now is the time for me to let go of the shame, the past behind me. I see anew. I'm ready for my change. I'm ready for my change. I forgive me. I forgive me. Everything that I've been holding on to, I let go. I surrender. I surrender. I'm ready for my change. I'm ready for my change. I forgive him. I forgive him. Everything